What would you do if the person you trusted the most turned against you? A mother, full of joy and anticipation, was just weeks away from welcoming her baby girl into the world. But she never got the chance. Instead of holding her newborn in her arms, she took her last breath, betrayed by the very man she once loved. Tameisha Price, 34 years old, a devoted mother of two, was shot multiple times in her own home. She was 8 months pregnant. Her unborn daughter, Malaysia Leani Price, never got the chance to live. And the person accused of this brutal crime? Not a stranger, not a thief in the night, but the man she trusted, the man she thought would stand by her side, Paris James. What could push someone to commit such a horrific act? And how did love turn into something so deadly? Stay with us as we uncover the heartbreaking truth behind this tragedy. We extend our deepest condolences to Tameisha Price's family and friends. Her tragic story is a sobering reminder to be cautious about who we allow into our lives and to recognize the dangers that can sometimes hide behind the people we trust the most. Before we delve further into the details of this case, we have a small favor to ask. If you appreciate the way we bring these stories to you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue sharing these important stories and shedding light on the injustices that need to be heard. We truly appreciate you. Now let's take a closer look at what happened on that fateful morning and the devastating betrayal that led to the loss of Tameisha Price and her unborn daughter, Malaysia Leani Price. January 24th, 2024. It was early morning in Toledo, Ohio, when a desperate 911 call came through. A teenage boy's voice, trembling but urgent, cut through the dispatcher's headset. "My mom has been shot!" The call lasted just over a minute, but in that short time, the boy gave enough details to send police racing to the scene. His mother, 34-year-old Tameisha Price, lay unresponsive in her bedroom, her body riddled with gunshot wounds. The officers who arrived at the home moved quickly, their boots heavy against the floor as they pushed through the doorway. The sight in front of them was one that would stay with them forever. Tameisha was sprawled on the bed, her skin pale, blood pooling beneath her. The room was eerily silent, except for the muffled sobs of her son in the hallway. It was clear she had been shot multiple times, but there was no weapon in sight. Her belly, swollen with the life she was preparing to bring into the world, was motionless. Paramedics rushed in, working quickly, checking for a pulse, for any sign of life. But there was nothing. Both Tameisha and her unborn daughter, Malaysia Leani Price, were gone. Her son, just 16, stood in shock as officers tried to calm him down. He had found her that way. He had been the one to dial 911. No child should ever have to witness something so horrifying. As detectives secured the scene, one question echoed in everyone's mind. Who could have done this, and why? To understand the depth of this tragedy, we need to know who Tameisha Price was, the woman who had her future stolen in an instant. Tameisha was more than just a name in the headlines. She was a mother, a daughter, a friend. She had spent her life caring for others, not just as a mom to her 2 kids, but in her career as well. She had studied nursing at Herzing University, driven by a passion for helping people. Those who knew her said she had a gift, a way of making people feel safe and cared for. But nursing wasn't her only love. Tameisha had a vibrant personality. She was into fashion, always putting together stylish outfits, and she had a knack for content creation. Whether it was sharing her favorite looks, giving advice, or just making people smile, she had a presence that drew people in. Her family described her as hard-working and full of life. She had dreams, goals, and a future she was excited about, especially when she found out she was pregnant with Malaysia. This baby was supposed to be a new chapter for her, a fresh start. Just a week before the tragedy, she had celebrated her baby shower, surrounded by love and laughter. She had posted pictures, smiling, glowing, ready to welcome her little girl into the world. But not everyone was happy about this pregnancy. Paris James, the man she had once trusted, the man believed to be Malaysia's father. At first, their relationship seemed like any other, but over time, things changed. Paris wasn't supportive. He didn't want this baby. From the moment Tameisha told him she was pregnant, the tension between them grew. He pressured her to get an abortion, insisting he wasn't ready to be a father. When she refused, standing firm in her decision, he became cold, distant, angry. He denied paternity, said the baby might not even be his. But deep down, Tameisha knew the truth. She wasn't about to be bullied into making a decision she didn't want. This was her child, and she was going to have her. Paris, however, saw things differently. Witnesses recalled how his attitude shifted in those last few months. He became withdrawn, frustrated, and according to some, desperate. Then, just days after celebrating her baby shower, Tameisha was dead. The investigation moved quickly, and what police uncovered was horrifying. This wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't a burglary gone wrong. It was a planned attack. And Paris James wasn't alone. Police found evidence linking two others to the crime, Jerry Scott and Shatwaya triplet. The details were damning. Phone records showed a disturbing series of messages. Paris had been talking about getting rid of the problem. Witnesses came forward, recalling moments where Tameisha had expressed fear that Paris might do something drastic. And then, there was the surveillance footage. Cameras from nearby properties captured movements that placed all three suspects near the crime scene on the night of the murder. Investigators pieced together the timeline. A week after the baby shower, the plan was set in motion. Tameisha was in her home, likely thinking about the baby she would soon meet. She had no idea what was coming. The attack happened swiftly. The shots rang out, piercing the quiet night. By the time her son found her, it was already too late. Paris James wanted to erase the problem, and to him, that problem was Tameisha and Malaysia. When the news of the murder spread, shock turned into grief. The loss was unbearable, not just for her family, but for the entire community. Friends, neighbors, even strangers were devastated. The hardest moment came at her funeral. Malaysia, the baby who never got the chance to take her first breath, was placed in the casket with her mother. A life that had barely begun was buried alongside the woman who had fought so hard to bring her into the world. People were heartbroken, but they were also angry. They wanted justice. It didn't take long for police to make arrests. Paris James, Jerry Scott, Shatwaya triplet. They were all taken into custody, facing serious charges. First-degree murder for the death of Tameisha. First-degree murder for the death of Malaysia. Conspiracy to commit murder. The evidence against them was strong. The phone records, the witness statements, the security footage. But even with all this, the legal battle was far from over. The Toledo community made it clear they wanted the harshest possible sentence. People spoke out, demanding justice for a mother and her unborn child. Tameisha's family, still trying to process their loss, had one message. She loved her baby. She wanted Malaysia. That was her choice, and he took that from her. Her child, the one she left behind, had to grow up without his mother. His life, shattered by one cruel act, would never be the same. This wasn't just a crime, it was the destruction. As the case moved forward, the weight of the evidence against Paris James, Jerry Scott, and Shatwaya triplet was impossible to ignore. Investigators had built a solid case, uncovering every detail that pointed to their guilt. In the days following the murder, the community of Toledo was gripped by shock and anger. People who had never met Tameisha found themselves mourning her loss. Social media was flooded with tributes, messages of grief, and demands for justice. Friends and family shared stories about her, how she had been a loving mother, a hard-working woman, and a friend who could always be counted on. But there was one lingering question on everyone's mind. How could someone she once cared about do this to her? The courtroom was packed on the day of the first hearing. The air was thick with emotion as Tameisha's family sat in silence, waiting to see the man responsible for her death. When Paris James walked in, dressed in a prison jumpsuit, he refused to look at them. His face was blank, his posture tense. Jerry Scott and Shatwire Triplet followed behind him, their expressions unreadable. They had been named as accomplices, but their roles in the crime were still being unraveled. Had they been part of the planning, or had they been manipulated into helping? The prosecution wasted no time in presenting the case. Text messages between Paris and his accomplices painted a chilling picture of what had been planned. In one message, Paris had written, "I can't let this happen. She thinks she got control, but I'll handle it." Another message revealed him discussing the problem with Jerry, hinting that something needed to be done before the baby arrived. Then there was the security footage, the grainy images that showed Jerry Scott's car circling Tameisha's neighborhood just hours before the shooting. The timestamps placed them near the scene, eliminating any chance of an alibi. Witness testimony only made things worse for the suspects. One friend of Tameisha's recalled how she had confided in her about Paris's threats. "She told me she was scared," the woman said on the stand, her voice shaking. "She said he didn't want the baby and that he was getting more and more aggressive. I told her to be careful. I told her to stay away from him." The hardest part of the trial, though, was hearing from Tameisha's son. The boy, just 16, was called to testify. As he walked to the witness stand, the courtroom fell silent. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but his pain was clear. "I found her," he said simply. "I called 911. He described the moment he walked into her room, the sight of his mother lying there, unmoving. "I tried to wake her up, but she wouldn't wake up." His words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Even the judge seemed to take a moment before continuing. The defense attorneys tried their best to cast doubt. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that no one had seen Paris pull the trigger, and that there was no physical proof tying Jerry and Shatwire to the crime. But the prosecution had something even more damning. Phone records showing that, on the night of the murder, Paris had called Jerry multiple times. And in the days after, he had searched for information about how police track cell phone locations. It was enough to convince the jury. After weeks of testimony, the verdict was read. Paris James, guilty of first-degree murder. Jerry Scott, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder. Shatwire Triplet, guilty of assisting in the crime. Tameisha's family held each other tightly as the courtroom erupted in emotion. Tears streamed down their faces. It wasn't enough to bring her back, but it was justice. Paris James was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jerry Scott received a 25-year sentence, while Shatwire Triplet was sentenced to 15 years for her role. Outside the courthouse, Tameisha's mother spoke through tears. "My daughter didn't deserve this," she said. "She was strong. She was loving. She was a mother. She wanted her baby and she fought for her. And now, because of him, they're both gone." Her voice broke, but she continued. "But we got justice, and that's what matters." The fight for justice had ended in victory, but the pain would never fully go away. Tameisha's child would grow up without his mother. Tameisha's dreams would remain unfulfilled. But in the hearts of those who loved her, she would never be forgotten. And neither would Malaysia. Some stories leave us with more questions than answers. How could something like this happen? How could a decision as personal as choosing to keep a child lead to such a violent end? Tameisha wanted to be a mother. She chose life for her baby, and for that choice, her own life was taken. It's a reality that's hard to accept, that a woman's right to choose was met with anger, control, and ultimately, murder. Is justice enough? Paris James will never walk free again. Jerry Scott and Shatwaya Triplet will serve time for their roles. But will that ever be enough for the family Tameisha left behind? Will it bring comfort to her son, who will grow up without his mother? Some people believe crimes like this should carry the ultimate punishment. Should people who commit such acts face the death penalty? Or does life in prison provide the justice they deserve? And what about Tameisha's family? Will they ever truly find peace? Or will they spend the rest of their lives haunted by the memories of what was taken from them? What do you think? Was justice served? Should harsher laws be in place to protect women in similar situations? Let us know in the comments. Please like this video and subscribe to our channels if you want more stories like this. Remember, your support helps us continue telling these stories and keep the world aware of cases like this. Thank you for watching.